A Treatise of Satan's Temptations. Part 2. By Richard Gilpin. A Discourse of the Malice, Power, Cruelty and Diligence of Satan. Of the various ways by which he hinders peace. 1. Way by discomposures of spirit. These discomposures explained, by showing, 1. What advantage he takes from our natural temper, and what tempers give him this advantage, and more. Chapter 6. Part 6. We never read his complaints against persecuting enemies, or for other afflictions. But still his heart is afraid that God is calling sin to remembrance. In Psalm 38, he is under great distress, and tells how low his thoughts were. He was troubled, greatly bowed down. He went mourning all the day long. He expresseth his thoughts to have been that God had forsaken him, verse 21, and his hopes, though they afterward revived, were almost gone. He cries out of his sins as having gone over his head, and become a burden too heavy for him, verse 4, and therefore sets himself to confess them, verse 18. He trembles at God's anger, and feels the arrows of God sticking fast in him, verse 2. But what occasioned all this? The psalm informs us, God had visited him with sickness, verse 7. Besides that, for one trouble seldom comes alone, his friends were perfidious, verse 11. His enemies also were busy laying snares for his life, verse 12. Now his thoughts were to this purpose, that surely he had some way, or other greatly provoked God by his sins, and therefore he fears wrath in every rebuke, and displeasure in every chastisement, verse 1. The like you may see in Psalm 102, where the prophet upon the occasion of sickness, verse 3, 23, and the reproach of enemies, verse 8, is under great trouble, and ready to fail except speedy relief prevent, verse 2, the reason whereof was this, that he concluded these troubles were evident tokens of God's indignation and wrath. Because of thine indignation and thy wrath, verse 10. From these 5 particulars we may be satisfied that it cannot be otherwise, and also how it comes to be so, that sometime trouble of conscience is brought on by other discomposing troubles of the mind. For if these take away the comforts which supported the soul, and afford also arguments to the devil to prove a wicked heart, and withal, a fit season to urge them to a deep impression, God in the meantime standing at a distance, and the thoughts naturally inclined to conclude God's wrath from these troubles, how impossible is it that Satan should miss of disquieting the conscience by his strong, vehement suggestions of wickedness and desertion? In our inquiries after Satan's success in working these discomposures of mind, we have discovered 1. That the disturbances thence arising are great. 2. That they have a tendency to trouble of conscience. There is but one particular more to be spoken of, relating to his success in this design, and that is 3. These disturbances are much in Satan's power. Ordinarily he can do it at pleasure, except when God restrains him from applying fit occasions, or when, notwithstanding these occasions, he extraordinarily suspends the effect, which he frequently doth when men are enraged under suffering, upon the account of the gospel and conscience. For then, though they be bound up under affliction and iron, yet the iron enters not into the soul. Though they are troubled, they are not distressed. These extraordinaries excepted, he can as easily discompose the spirits of men as he can, by temptation draw them into other sins. Which may be evidenced by these considerations. 1. We may observe that those whose passionate tempers do usually transport them into greater vehemencies, are never out of trouble. Their fits frequently return, they are never out of the fire, and this is because Satan is still provided of occasions suitable to their inclinations. 2. Though God, out of his common bounty to mankind, hath allowed him a comfortable being in the world, yet we find that generally the sons of men, under their various occupations and studies, are wearied out with vexations of spirit. This Solomon, in Ecclesiastes, discovers at large in various employments of men, not exempting the pursuit of wisdom and knowledge, chapter 1, 18, in much wisdom is much grief. And he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow, nor pleasures nor riches, for by all these he shows that a man is obnoxious to disquiets. So that the general account of man's life is, but this, chapter 2, 23, all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. That it is so, is testified by common experience past denial. But how it comes to be so, is the inquiry. It is either from God, or from Satan working by occasions upon our tempers. That it is not from God, is evident. For though sorrow be a part of that curse which man was justly doomed unto, yet hath he appointed ways and means, by which it might be so mitigated, that it might be tolerable without discomposure of spirit. And therefore Solomon, designing in his Ecclesiastes to set forth the chief good, shows that felicity consists not in the common abuse of outward things, because that brings only vexation, but in the fear of God leading to future happiness, and in the meantime in a thankful, comfortable use of things, present without anxiety of mind. Hence doth he fix his conclusion, as the result of his experience, and often repeats it, there is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. Chapter 2:24, 3:12, 13, and 5:18, 19. Not that Solomon plays the epicure, giving advice to eat and drink, for tomorrow we die, nor that he speaks deridingly to those that seek their felicity in this life, as if he should say, if ye do terminate your desires upon a terrene felicity, there is nothing better than to eat and drink, etc. But he gives us serious positive advice of enjoying the things of this life with cheerfulness, which he affirms proceeds from the sole bounty of God as his singular gift. It is the gift of God, chapter 3:13. It is our portion, that is, our allowance, chapter verse 19. For these two expressions, our portion, and God's gift, they are of the same signification with Solomon here. And when a man hath power to enjoy this allowance in comfort, it is God that answereth him in the joy of his heart. Verse 20. It is plain, then, that God sows good seed in his field. The springing up, therefore, of these tares of vexation, which so generally afflict the sons of men, must be ascribed to this, the enemy hath done it. Matthew 13:28. 3. It is also a considerable ground of suspicion that Satan can do much in discomposures of spirit, in that sometimes those whose tempers are most cool and calm, and whose singular dependence upon, and communion with God, must needs more strengthen them against these passionate vexations, are notwithstanding precipitated into violent commotions. Moses was naturally meek above the common disposition of men, and his very business was converse with God, whose presence kept his heart under a blessed awe. Yet, upon the people's murmuring, he was so transported with sullenness and unbelief, at the waters of Meribah, Numbers 20:10-12, that it went ill with him. Which David thus expresseth, Psalm 106:33, they provoked his spirit, so that he spake unadvisedly with his lips. Who can suppose less in this matter than that Satan, having him at advantage, hurried him to this rashness, specially seeing such vehemencies were not usual with Moses, and that his natural temper led him to the contrary. This hath some affinity with the next consideration, which is 4. That when men most foresee the occasions of their trouble and do most fear the trouble that might thence arise, and most firmly design to keep their hearts quiet, yet are they oft forced, against all care and resolution, upon extravagant heats. David resolved and strenuously endeavored to possess his soul in serenity and patience. For what could be more than that solemn engagement? Psalm 39:1, I said I will look to my ways. And what endeavors could be more severe than to keep himself as with bit and bridle? What care could be more hopeful to succeed than to be dumb with silence? Yet for all this he could not keep his heart calm nor restrain his tongue. Verse 3, my heart waxed hot within me. While I was musing the fire burned, then spake I with my tongue. Who suspects not the hand of Satan in this? 5. It is also remarkable, that when we have least reason to give way to discomposure, when we have most cause to avoid all provocations, yet then we have most occasion set before us. When we would most retire from the noise of the world for private devotion, when we would most carefully prepare ourselves for a solemn ordinance, if we be not very watchful, we shall be diverted by business, disturbed with noises, or some special occasion of vexation shall importune us to disquiet ourselves, when yet we shall observe, if we have not these solemn affairs to wait upon, we shall have fewer of these occasions of vexation to attend us. This cannot be attributed to mere contingency of occasions, nor yet to our temper solely. For why they should be most apt to give us trouble when they are most engaged to calmness, cannot well be accounted for. It is evidently, then, Satan that maliciously directs these occasions, for they have not a malicious ingenuousness to prepare themselves, without some other chief mover, at such times as he knows would be most to our prejudice. Thanks.